What's up, guys? I think we're live. Alrighty. So, I sort of want to start off where I left off in the first stream, which was, should probably start the server. We created a functionality that basically allowed you to click on a specific submission in the, I guess I just start from the beginning. So, I have a project that allows you to with a shareable link, it allows you to get everyone's availabilities, and then it shows you when, which times everyone's available. So what we did in the first stream is basically we added the functionality to check out an individual submission's availability. So I just want to continue sort of adding different characteristics. So I believe I started the so I started the server, and right now I'm starting the create React app server. By the way, this npm start thing, it's let me find it actually. It should be in the package.json. Nope, not there. Node modules, I apologize. Where is it? If I can find it. Okay, here. So it's basically this the script which create React app has automatically, and then you just type that into console when you're in the directory, and then it should start up. It's gonna open a port at 3000, and I believe my backend is at, which port did I make it? Let me see. The backend's at port 5000, so these two are interacting with each other. And I actually have I have a functionality that I've added to the backend that I haven't necessarily added to the front end. So if I can find the route, I believe. So it was basically when you load your surveys, which I believe should be a get requests on surveys. There we go. So when you load your surveys, it has this value. So it obviously has the surveys itself, but also has the has more. What that is basically it says, should I be able to send another request? So if has more is true, then it should be able to send another request. Otherwise, it should say that's it, right, on the front end. So at the moment, what it does is it loads up to 5 surveys. But I want to get it to do that for any number of surveys. But you just have to click on load more or something along those lines. So I'm actually going to, I have to first of all create new surveys. So I'm going to say dummy if I can spell survey right. So dummy survey 1. I'm going to say sometime in the future. I'm going to say first name. And so this is the page for that specific survey. I can go back to my surveys. And I also added this refresh thing up here. So basically what it does is once it loads, it stores in a Redux, and it only loads when you land on this My Surveys page if it realizes that you don't have any surveys loaded. Otherwise, it gives you the option to reload. So there we have our new survey. I'm actually going to create a new one. I'm gonna create 6, which is should be enough. Dummy surveys. Sorry, 2. Probably should have done this beforehand, so I apologize. Let's create 2 more. I have to come up with some weird names. So again, sometime in the future. By the way, this identifier, it determines what what the person who submits should write to identify themselves. So it's like when you're in your console. So when you go to My Surveys and click on a survey, that's what shows up next to the submission. So it basically says this is this person's submission. Okay, so it seems like we should have 6. And what I want want to do is I want to implement this has more thing, and I believe we do store that in Redux. So I should probably check that out. So I'm gonna go to store reducers, and this should be in surveys. Okay, so yeah, we do load has more. We also have a loading prop, but I'm gonna stick with this has more for now. And basically, all I want to do is I want to say at the very bottom of here, I want to be able to sort of like the refresh thing we have up here. I want you to be able to load a new set of surveys. In fact, this load survey success, this action type, it actually concatenates what it loaded with the previous state. So yeah, so basically what this action does is it adds the loaded surveys to what it already currently has. And that can get sort of dicey because if you click on load more while there has been a change, in other words, while something has been added, then it can have duplicates. So we do have to keep that in mind. So what I'm thinking at the moment is I should just go to the my surveys component. I gotta close all these tabs. I'm kind of bad with the tabs. I have way too many open. So go to my surveys, and then I want to first of all check if has more. Okay, we do have a has more. We have access to it now. We just need to make the functionality. So what I'm gonna do is first of all just sort of get an idea of what's going on. I'm gonna say console log this just to be sure. Has more. I believe it was. Okay. So should live refresh. I don't know what's going on honestly. It says compiling. Okay, there we go. So let's check the console because that's what we did. We console logged it. Okay, it says true. So okay, what that means is it recognizes that there are more surveys. And what I want to do here is I want to show a loader here, or a refresh button. So similar to if we jump between routes back to my surveys, I don't want to send a new request. Instead, I want to give the user the option to reload. So I want to do something similar to this icon. I believe it's a material UI icon here. So not necessarily circular progress, but refresh icon. There we go. That's what we need. So I want to be able to add something like this. So what I'm going to do is I might need to change some styling first because this is not enough space. So I'm going to go in here and say padding. It's normally 5 view height, and I'm going to just give that some more space. 300 pixels should be good. That's too much. Say 100 pixels. Okay, that's good enough. Yeah, so we just want to basically put this thing in here. Okay, another issue I just realized is if we place it here, we might have to position it absolutely. So I'm just going to add it here. So I'm going to say, I believe it, yeah, Control C this, and I just want to see where that shows up. Okay, so it's showing up here, and what I want to do is I want to give this a class name, and let's say load more icon. And I'm just going to copy this and place this into my CSS. By the way, I'm using CSS modules, not CSS and JS. It's just a personal preference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a margin. So I'm going to say margin. Wait, let's check to see if margin auto works first. Shouldn't, but it might. Yeah, it didn't work. By the way, we're not going to be rendering this no matter what. This is going to be rendered conditionally, so we just want to get the positioning correct in the first place. So I want to say there's another tactic to centering it. which is margin left. I want to set it to 50%. And what margin left does is basically says 50% of this width that's available should be on the left side of this. And that sort of skews it too much to the right this time. And so what you can do is you can say transform, and you can use the function translate, and you want to translate it back, or in other words to the left, back 50% the width of this icon. So first let's just see how that looks like without translating it back. So you can see it's sort of centered, but if I open pesticide here, you can see that it's not quite centered here. If you check it out in comparison to the footer, it's really not centered. So what I'm going to do is I want to translate it left half the width of that icon itself. So I'm going to say minus 50%. That should work, hopefully. There we go. Now, I just realized I don't know how this will jive with the absolute positioning. In fact, I don't even know if we need absolute positioning. Yeah, I think I'm gonna ditch that idea. So I'm gonna add some padding to the icon itself, not necessarily the page. So the padding for the bottom to the icon itself looks relatively good. Sorry. So I'm sort of ditching the idea of just positioning it absolutely, because we know for a fact that this only is going to show up when we have more, and if the number of surveys isn't 0, so that's some more conditional logic I have to add. So I'm going to say margin top. I want to give it a 40 pixel margin to the top, just to give it some space. Let's say 35 and we'll call it a day. Okay. Also, I believe there's a prop you can add to Material UI icons, which is font size. I might be wrong. And it's a string, so I want to say large. Let's see if that works. I just want it to be, yeah, there we go. And I want to also, I haven't thought of if we needed a text here. I'm wondering if we should have a text. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to add a div. I normally don't like, a bunch of divs, but this sort of seems necessary. So I'm going to actually give this class name to the div. Oh, it's going to cause an error. So what I basically want to do is I want to add some text next to the thing, and it appears we have broken it. Okay, I see what's up. So I actually think a span would be better. That's the issue. So it's taking up the whole width, and so it's really confused by the transform translate. Yeah, it's not working either. Feels like it's definitely too much to the left. I think I'm gonna undo that. And I'm actually just gonna try to position it right next to it. So I'm gonna say add a paragraph, and I want to say load more. Well, not necessarily like that. Load more. And I want to center this. I wonder if I can just do that. I remember in HTML you could center it with a prop, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be working. So I'm just gonna add I'm gonna say my surveys P, would it be? I think I'll just give it a unique class name. I'm gonna say classes dot I wanna say load more text, or prompt I should say, prompt, if I can spell correctly. So I wanna add this to the thing as well. And now that I think about it, I should add a div. I know, sorry, I'm going all over the place right now. I'm gonna say put that in here. I'm gonna say load more instead of icon. I'm just gonna say load more box. So this is the box that holds the text and the icon. And let me see. Let's see box, and I think margin auto should work this time. So what I'm gonna do is, yeah, this seems to not be working yet, but I'm gonna do instead of, I believe I could just actually change it to a span now that I think about it, because I want it to be inline, but I don't want to have to change the styling directly. So hopefully, okay, this didn't work either. This is confusing, dude. I don't know what's going on. Is it maybe I didn't save the CSS? Okay, I'm confused. Let's check it out from developer tools. So I'm gonna say inspect. And I'm not necessarily understanding. Okay. This is, I'm not understanding why. It might be because this is a paragraph. And it's not inline, so I'm gonna say span for this as well. Hopefully. Still, it's not working. It's strange, it's not showing the span with pesticide. So I'm actually gonna undo a second time. And yeah, I think I'll just go the other route. So I think I'll do this. So we have, I'm gonna get rid of the margin top, and I'm gonna use it on load more prompt. Okay. So I believe we added the class name. No. Now it should work. Okay, so we have some spacing between load more and the surveys. And the last thing I want to do right now is I want to add a text align. Let me say center. There we go. Let me see. I actually don't want the I don't want there to be margin, like too much margin between the icon and the prompt. So I'm gonna say margin top 0. That's strange. Oh, never mind. That might be from the span. So I'm gonna say margin 0 here, and then hopefully I should fix it. There we go. Except that undoes the margin top. So I think I'll get pretty fancy and do this. So hopefully we should be good. There we go. That's what we want. So we don't want to render this all the time. So we're gonna have to render this conditionally, and that condition is going to be that there are a certain number of surveys. So basically, the number of surveys is 0, and I also want to do it based on has more that we get. So I'm gonna put these in curly braces. Okay, there we go. And I'm gonna do a little ternary expression. So I'm gonna say props dot surveys dot length is greater than 0. And I think we got props dot, let me see, has more, right? So we're basically saying if the number of surveys is greater than 0 and if there is more to be loaded, we're going to say display this, otherwise display null. And it seems to be, oh yeah, so this wants just one thing, so I'm going to put this within a React fragment. This should be good. There we go. So we now render it conditionally, such that it shows up only when there's more than 0 surveys, and there's more surveys to load. Other than that, I believe there might be an issue with this refresh thing at the top. I'm not too sure if I necessarily want to be loading them at once because, well, first of all, it doesn't look right for them to be 2. And second of all, there's an issue of if this isn't the latest version that they have loaded, this might not work with the so if the user reloads it and it turns out there is more surveys added from the time this was loaded, there's no problem. But if he directly says load more, then we're going to see some duplicates. So that's going to be an issue. So I also want to render this if this refresh thing isn't rendered. So I want to say, I want to store that boolean basically. Sorry. So what I'm going to say is show refresh box. Well, you gotta give that a value. So I'm going to say const show refresh box. We're going to set that equal to this that we're putting in the if statement. So the reason I'm doing this is so I can reuse this this value without necessarily having to come up with it again. So we're going to say if show refresh box this, and now that we did that, this small change, I can actually go here and say and this is false. So and show refresh box is false. So this hopefully won't render if the refresh button renders. So I'm going to save this and see if it works out. So load more renders, that's good. So if I change routes, this shows up. Alright, we're good. So it's not rendering, so that's what we want. And if I render it, there we go. Okay. So what I want to do right now is obviously actually add the functionality to load more. I hope that I have an action creator to load surveys. I hope. Oh yeah, see, I passed the current posts thing. So what that does basically is it says this is the current number of posts I have, and we use that to actually send the request within the header. So I say current posts equals whatever number, and then on the survey, if I can go back to it, on the server, sorry, I want to get the, alright, get surveys, this is the route we want. Let me see. Okay, so the skip values based on the current posts that we send into the header. So that basically means if we send 3, this is going to skip 3 after it sorts by time. This created app value here. So this is, we're not going to worry about this necessarily. We're just going to use this to our advantage at this point. I think I'm not too sure when I wrote this, but it's been a while. So I have to really, I should probably document it a bit better. But yeah, this is why we're passing that. So if we loaded these already, it's going to give us everything after the first 5. So what I want to do right here is I want to add a on-click listener, but before I do that, I need to actually have a method that does this, a handler method. I'm wondering if I could just do it inline, so if I can just say on-click, oh, I should spell that correctly. Okay, on-click, and I want to call props.load surveys, onload surveys, my bad. So on load surveys, and this takes in 3 arguments. So it's access token, current posts, and reset. This reset value is basically it asks whether or not it should load from the ground up. In other words, it asks if it should delete the number of the surveys we do have and just load it again. I think it's fine if I just add the first 2. So I'm going to say props.access token for the first, because the action creator needs the access token to send the request. Yeah, it puts it in the header here. And secondly, we need the current posts, so that's going to be, where did I write the on-click? Okay, that's going to be props dot surveys dot length. Okay, I can't spell it. There we go. So let's hope this works. Okay, it loaded all of them at once. That's not good. Let me see what went wrong. Oh, I gotta embed this with another method function. I apologize. I keep saying method for some reason. I'm used to Java, so that's probably why. So if I say load more, there we go. That's good. Okay, so it appears that functionality is set. And we also have a refresh here. It's cool. One small thing I want to change is, it's kind of bugging me, is the cursor. So this thing right here. I want to, let me see if I can find that. Load more icon. I want to say cursor pointer. There we go, like this. It might be more logical just to make it a button, but since I don't want the styling of any button, it would probably take longer to style the button and say, you know, background color, transparent, border, none. I just like changing the cursor and get done with. So, one thing I also want to change is, I want to say opacity, let's say 0.8. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to add a hover value as well. So, more icon. So, with a pseudo selector hover, we should be able to increase the opacity and say opacity, can't spell today, opacity 1, so hopefully, there we go. It's not much of a difference, but it's just a little, you know, nod that this is a button, so I like to do it. What else do we want? So if I change the routes, just to double check, okay, this one shows up. I believe one more thing I want to do is add a prompt to this one as well. So I'm gonna go here and say, if I can find it first. I'm looking for the refresh. Okay, there we go, refresh box. And inside of here, I just want to say span. And what do I want here? I should probably change this to a paragraph tag. I'm going to say refresh. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that does not look good at all. So I'm actually going to, I'm kind of lazy to create another class name, so I'm just going to go here and say margin 0. Okay, that's not how you do that. So when you're styling in JS, you have to pass in an object, and all the values have to be within a string. And the regular syntax of CSS, it doesn't really apply. Okay, so change routes. There we go. That's better. So the reason I want to render load more and refresh separately is because if there's a possibility that a new survey was created, in other words, if I went here, created a survey, and came back here, and if I were to press load more directly without refreshing, then what will happen is the server will understand as we already have the newest one, and we want to send the 6th one as starting from this one. So I would have basically a duplicate of this 5th one, and you know, we get into pretty dicey territory when that happens. Normally, if this were like a social media application, then I would have to refresh basically every time. But since the only person who can create a new survey is the user, then it's basically not an issue. So if the user creates here, comes back, then we know that there's a decent chance that the user created a new one. So we can choose not to render this load more. So they have to refresh first and then load more. Alrighty. Also, I believe I might have seen an issue. So if I press load more, yeah, that's not good. So I believe what happened is there's a delay that's added. I don't know if you guys realized it, but there's like a cascading effect, and it's adding this sixth in line as if everything were cascading down. And so this is getting rendered really late. So if I come here, if I say load more, it's getting rendered really late. So that's an issue with the animation delay. So if I can find it, hopefully. Let me see. It's probably when we render the surveys inside here. So let me see. Oh yeah, there we go. Delay. So what's basically doing is the newest survey has an index of 5 in this case. This one, so it's saying 5 times 0.1, which is 0.6. It's saying delay this phase in animation by 0.6 seconds. So we're gonna have to account for that. I believe what we can do is we can add a new state. I don't think we used state in this. Oh yeah, we did. So we've imported a useState hook, and I'm going to say const. So my idea is to basically when we render that, if the previous number of what do you call it? The previous number of surveys was different. I wonder if I can use a use reducer hook because we have access to the previous say there. So I'm gonna go in here and say num surveys and set num surveys. And we set that equal to use state. I remember I solved this issue in another project. I just can't remember exactly how I did it. We don't want to set it to false, we want to set it to 0 initially when it loads. Okay. So what we want to do here is we want to basically say set num surveys after it loads. So let me see. I probably have a use effect hook somewhere that I can use. I actually don't. So I think I'm going to have to create a new use effect hook. So I'm going to say use effect. And it's going to call this function when we see a change in, what do we want to see change in? Props.surveys, right? So I'm going to say if props. What am I doing? So if the new number of surveys is, I want to say, I'm thinking of exactly how I did it before, because the way I did it before might have not been the recommended method. I think what I did before was actually whatever I was doing in here. So I would actually check if props.surveys.length or the whatever I used in that other project. I would check that if it was equal to the current state. Okay, this is going to be an issue because I don't necessarily want to call a function within here. Let me see. What if I could say previous num surveys? But how would I add that functionality? So I want to store the previous number of surveys. I wonder how I could do that. Let me see. So I think I could use a use effect hook to actually set the previous number of surveys. So I'm going to say prev num. I'll be back in a second, guys. I have something urgent. My bad, guys. I didn't tell the folks at home I was streaming. So I'm going to say set. What am I doing? I'm going to say set previous num surveys. And let me see. So if I say this is a bit of a pickle. I think I might be able to set this equal to an object actually. I know I'm going back and forth. So I apologize, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say num surveys. I'm going to say current 0. This is initially, obviously, and then previous. And this is going to be 0 as well. So what I want to do is I want to store both the current and the previous one. So I'm going to say if props.surveys .length does not equal props.surveys num surveys, I think it was called, num surveys .current. Remember, we can't access it directly, so I'm going to say if it doesn't equal num surveys current, we want to set num surveys to, let me see, so current, we want to set it equal to, obviously, props.surveys length. And I also want to, because there might be an issue with a reference data type, I'm actually going to store the current one. So I'm going to say previous, let's say prev num surveys. What am I doing? Not paying attention. So I'm going to say previous num surveys dot current. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the current value to props.surveys.length. And I'm going to change the previous value to the value that we just created, previous or prev num surveys. So hopefully this should work. Well, it shouldn't work immediately, obviously. I actually want to console log this just before render, so sorry, return. So I'm going to say console.log num surveys, and I actually want to console log both current and previous. So I want to say inspect, check my console. Obviously they're objects. That's not good. Okay, it did work. My apologies. Yeah, so we should be good on this end. I want to refresh just to make sure though. I think the console logs I was looking at were beforehand, like when it was doing all the authentication stuff. By the way, every time it loads, it actually sends a request with the auth token, and that's what determines what you have access to in the navigation bar. So actually, by the way, if you were to try to go to /my surveys, if you didn't have a valid auth token, then you'd be kicked off. So that's sort of why it's rendering a lot in the beginning, as you see here. It's one of the reasons, I should say. So there we go. We do have current and previous num. So I'm going to say inside of this map, when we map out our surveys, I want to say I want to put this within another parentheses. So I'm going to say this, and I actually want to. Oops, sorry, it's not where I was trying to go. So I want to say index minus C. I just want to do it inline as index minus, I think, previous num surveys. So num surveys dot previous. And I hope that if we have a negative delay, that won't cause an issue. But if it does, okay, let's let's recheck that. So hopefully when I should click this, there we go. So that seemed to work. There was like a flicker in my browser, but that happens pretty often. At least I hope it's not because of this. So if I refresh, actually let me see. Oh wow, so a side effect of this is that if we refresh, they all load at the same time. So I think that's sort of a minute issue that we want to fix later. So it appears that this has worked. I just want to double check and make a new survey. So bougie 5. Let's see. So refresh, and then I want to load more. All right, seems to be working. So what I actually want to do is I want to tackle the issue of all of them phasing in at the same time. And the way I want to do that is, I'm wondering, because I'm loading them through through an action creator, so I don't necessarily have access to, create a function that happens after these the surveys load. So I'm wondering if I could just, alright, so I guess I'm kind of dozing off at this point. So what I want to do is basically when we change routes, we get this refresh thing, and when I click on it, they all have probably a negative delay, which makes them load just at once. So what I want to do is, when we press refresh, I still want to have that cascading effect. Now it's just an issue of finding where I put that functionality. So obviously we have our delay here, and this is more of an issue of state, I think. So let's see, when we say when we have a refresh box, what is that on click? It says refresh button clicked handler. So let's control F that. There we go. Okay, so this is the function. That's interesting. I put an async here. I wonder why. So what I want to do here is I want to set num surveys, and I actually want to set it to what we set it to initially. So I want it to be as if we just loaded it. So hopefully this should give us the cascading effect that we wanted. So if we change routes and come back here, there we go. Alrighty, so that appears to be fixed. I want to get into testing actually pretty soon, but that wouldn't really be fun to do on here. So I'm looking to see if there's any sort of functionality that I wanted to add that I can't think of at the moment. Oh yeah, I thought of something. So this my surveys here, I don't necessarily want it to be purple if we are inspecting a certain survey. So what I want to do is, I believe that's a nav bar, should be, and I want to go to my surveys if I can find it. By the way, this is the sort of thing I was talking about. So we're basically rendering the nav bar depending on the user's authentication. So if the authentication isn't loading and we do have a username, which is basically how I check to see if the user is authenticated, then we render this list in the nav bar here. Otherwise, if the authentication isn't loading and there is no username, which basically means that the user hasn't been authenticated, then we render this one, which is a different list. Let me see, home, sign up, and login. So what I want to do here is within my surveys, I actually want to I want to make it so that the URL has to be exact, and I wonder if, let me see, so React router DOM, which is what I'm using for routing. DOM, I want to see exact nav link. Let me see. So I'm gonna say exact. Oh, okay. So it appears, I believe, we can just pass an exact, and that should fix it. I hope so. So when you write an exact, a prop, and you don't necessarily set it to equal to anything, React perceives that as a boolean. So I hope. So we put on, yeah, we put on my surveys, and if I click on one of them, there we go. Awesome. So the reason I wanted to actually fix that is because when you're inspecting a survey, you might think that, oh, I'm already in my surveys. So I just want to make it so that the user knows that, hey, I'm outside of my surveys, and I can go back to my list of surveys if I just click on this. Okay, so let me see. What else can I do? I'm trying to remember what functionality I wanted to add. I had a huge list. I just lost it. So this logout seems to be working fine. I checked it previously. I'm just gonna put in my password and hope that this works. There we go. We're back in. I just want to double check the logout functionality. So I guess I want to sort of let me double check to see if we can delete. I apologize, guys. It's been a while since I've been really on top of this project. Okay, so deletion looks good. So I sort of want to elaborate on this inspect. I want to say like a portal. I'm trying to remember what functionalities I wanted on here. So there was an issue last time with in the first live stream. Basically, the only functionality we added in the first live stream was we're able to click on this, and it shows you what times a certain person is available. This functionality I've added beforehand, just on my own time. So I guess I'll just try to fix the this issue. So basically, the reason it's not working is because these titles on the submission have an click away listener, and what that basically means is it listens for when we click somewhere else from this title. And the reason I do that is because I didn't want to add necessarily another input and say inspect submissions or inspect by number of people. I just wanted the user to be able to click on something and then an individual submission and then click away to see everyone or times one person is available. So I guess I'll just try to fix this thing right here. So the reason this isn't working is because this click away listener is actually sees this as a foreign thing. So it basically sees this as a, what do you call it? It sees this as a click away from the submission. So it executes. So what I want to do is I want to fix that. However, I'm not too sure I know how to. One thing I'm tempted to try is because when we click from this to this, there are two things simultaneously going on. It's listening for a click away from this, and it's also I'm also listening for a click on this title here, this submission name, I should say. So I'm tempted to try to put sort of a set timeout on this thing, so it happens after this click away functionality. So I want to try that. It's really, I want to say it's not really an optimal solution, but it could work. So I'm going to go in here and it's obviously not on my surveys. I'm going to close all of these and I want to say inspect. There we go. So let me see. Where was the there we go, person. And what I want to do is I want to get inside this person component and sort of try to think of a way that we can. So what I'm thinking at the moment is actually creating a function So I want to say click, but this wasn't the one I was trying to delay though. Interesting. So I think what we have to do is we have to add this handler function here and then embed a set timeout within that. So I want to say function um, user user clicked handler. By the way, the naming convention I'm using is the traditional one. In other words, handler functions should always have a handler at the end of it. I'm not too sure exactly why, but I do follow that. So inside of here, I want to say set time out. It's been a while since I've actually used set time out, so I apologize. I might have to look at some talks. So I believe we just passed in a function, and we have a delay in, let me see, yeah, in milliseconds. So I want to say, let's try, what am I doing? Like this. I wonder if I could just pass in 1 as is. I think I can. So I'm going to say set timeout and do this after 1 millisecond. So that thing I want to do is this on click. So I'm going to say inspect. I want to call this function inside here. So I'm going to say user clicked handler. So hopefully, there we go. So if I click from this bougie guy to chunk, awesome. There is sort of an issue with you can see sort of a change inside of here. So if I go from this guy to this guy, there's like a tiny shift. And what I believe it's doing is it's running everything that's synchronous first, and then running our asynchronous. So what JavaScript does is it executes everything that's synchronous first, and then puts basically something asynchronous like afterwards in the call stack. So I'm wondering if we can pass 0. Just out of curiosity, I don't know if that's a tenable solution. Okay, so it's not horrible, but it's definitely not an optimal solution. I'm gonna try to find one. First off, I think we can directly put this into the onClick. So I'm tempted to just do this, and I'm not too sure if we need braces here, curly braces. I mean. Okay, so okay, this is not what we want at all. So hopefully this retains the functionality. Oh, okay, I see what's up. That should fix it, hopefully. Make it not jittery. There we go. The reason that was giving an issue is we're calling it directly. In other words, we have a function name here, and we have an execution that's not necessarily within a function itself. So by adding this, we put this function call within the context of another function that hasn't been called yet. It's sort of hard to wrap your head around in the beginning, but so I'm sort of I'm not too sure what I can do in order to maybe get a better solution than this, because this works just fine the way we did it before, but doing it between 2 submissions, although it works, there's sort of a jitter to it. I'm wondering if I can fix that. So, I'm tempted to sort of play around with this mouse event prop here, because we want to say, I'm wondering if there's a way to say if props.is is inspected and the user didn't click on another click-away listener, which is relatively hard to do. I'm thinking of a way to do it, but I'm not too sure how logical it would be. So there's what comes to mind in Material UI is a use media query. So I'm wondering if there's like a use hover, which I'm very probably doesn't exist, but let me see. Hover feedback. I wonder what this is. Oh wow, that's cool. Um, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. So what I'm sort of what I'm sort of interested in is if, for example, when we click on this, if us hovering over this one can turn off the click away listener on this. That's my sort of inclination. Um, I don't know of a way to do that. I would really seriously have to sit down and think about that. And I don't know if it's best to do it right now. So I'll sort of ruminate on that. I'll try to think that through. But for now, I don't think it's possible. So um, I sort of want to look for problems and then find immediate solutions for this one. I don't seem to be thinking of any sort of functionality I want to add immediately. We did add this load more, and then within inspect, we did sort of add the ability to go between users, although we did add sort of a minute bug here, where when we switch between users, it does load the other one instead of just going to this option here, but it is pretty jittery. So this works fine. It's just, yeah, I don't I don't necessarily know of a sort of elegant solution to this. At the moment, I'm thinking of obviously um, hovering over this, disabling the click away listener on this submission, but I don't necessarily know how to do that. So I'm going to say hover in JavaScript um, React. Let's see. How can I access a hover state in React.js? This is exactly what we want. React components expose all standard JavaScript mouse events on the top level interface. On mouse enter. Okay, that's interesting. So to manage hover interactions, you'll want to use on mouse enter and on mouse leave. You can attach them to handlers in your components like so. That's interesting. I actually wanna sort of finagle with this. So I wanna go inside in person, and I want to on hover. Sorry, I forgot the prop. That is on mouse enter and on mouse leave. So I sort of want to play around with this. I actually want to see if IntelliSense gives me the option there. Yeah, it does. Okay, awesome. So inside of here, I want to say I want to. This is pretty interesting. I'm wondering if I can on mouse enter, if I can call a function that would alert the parent component that this is very confusing for me. So what I want to do is I want to create a function inside of here. I don't know if I necessarily want to add another state though. Screw it. Let's add it. So I'm going to say const hub. Actually, just before we do that, I want to double check that this does work. So I'm going to say console.log, because I believe what the other person was using was a class-based component. So I just want to make sure that this works. So I want to check out console. I just want to sort of hover over. I am so stoked right now. I didn't know this was actually a thing, and I'm very excited. Awesome, dude. Yeah, I find this sort of stuff exciting, dude. I'm a loser. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to add a state. Let's say hover. Um, what do I want to call it? Because I want to say the user is hovering over a submission. So use submission. Should I say submission hover set? Oh, I don't want a period there. Set submission hover. Set submission hover. And I want to set this equal to use state, and I want it to be false initially. Alrighty, so we created that, and I want to pass this functionality to my person component here. I know it's a long list of things we're passing, but React is really well in that it doesn't really give too much of a performance hit. I might think of other some optimization methods, but for the moment I think this is the best we can do. So I'm going to say set hover let's say on hover. That wouldn't necessarily make sense because we also want to add the alternative to this, on mouse leave I think it was. So I'm actually going to put this on different lines so it's a bit more readable. So I'm going to say on mouse leave, and I want to call a function in here as well. This is basically an empty function that I'm putting here, so it doesn't execute anything, but it still listens for it. And so I want to fill that. So I'm going to say set hover, because we do want to be able to set it to false as well. So I'm going to say set hover, set submission hover. Okay. So we're passing that function as is without calling it, and inside of here I want to say set submission, props.onHover, I think it was. I have to double check the name. Props.setHover. Sorry, I just gotta readjust my mic here. So props.setHover, and I would call this and pass in on mouse leave. I want to say false, and the other version of that is obviously true. So I want to say when the user is hovering over this this H4 here, which I'm hoping won't be accidental, so it won't cause a complete re-render that often. So I hope we're good on performance-wise. I hope that doesn't really take a hit. So let me see. I actually want to console log this. Hopefully I'll take this console log off before forgetting it. So I'm going to say submission hover. I want to see if this works first of all. So first of all, check out console. It's false, good. Yeah, it's not, doesn't seem to be working. Oh, sorry, I forgot to save this person component. And awesome. Alrighty. I don't know how healthy this is because we're computing a lot of things. But React is pretty much a champ in this end. This is not even the production build, and it's that fast because it's executing all of these. Not necessarily that, but it's executing basically every use effect hook here. It's checking every value inside of here. I'm just sort of blown away by React by the day, man. Anyway, I got sidetracked. So what I want to do inside of here is okay, so set hover is good. So we're console logging not from person, but we're console logging from the state inside of here. So we have everything we need to fix that issue, I believe. So I think I could pass. I know I'm passing a lot of values to person, but they genuinely, like, person is just that complicated at this point. So I want to say submission hover. I'm trying to think of a better name than the submission hover, but I can't seem to think of any. So submission hover. And I want to get inside. I want to go to person, and I want to say, I want this mouse event thing. This is what actually triggered me going off and checking for the hover in JavaScript in the first place. So this mouse event is really what we're doing, what we're working for at this point. So we want to set it off. So we don't want this on click away listen to work if we're hovering on a I'm gonna say on a person or submission. So I want to say and props dot, I believe it was submission hover if that is false. And I want to double check that I want to get rid of this really janky this set timeout here, because this is the entire reason we went on this path here. So hopefully, fingers crossed. Okay, React did not like whatever I just did. Exceeded maximum. Okay, so we're calling this immediately, and that's triggering a re-render, which calls this again, which triggers a re-render, which calls this again. That's why you get sort of you get that error. So you really want to make sure that if you're calling a function within an onClick, that it's embedded within another function. In other words, if you're doing this, you also want this, or with the function keyword, however you prefer, like that. You never want to just call a function directly inside of onClick without embedding it within another function. Be that it worked. Alrighty, I'm very excited. Okay, I think that's it for today. So just to recap what we did, inside of my surveys, we added a load more option here, which sort of plays along with the backend. What else did we do? We, inside of an inspect, the inspect component I should say, inside of here, we added the functionality to click between submissions. We first tried out, we basically, our first attempt at doing this was basically to put this submission click behind the set timeout so that the click away will execute first before this let me see, the set submission thing. So that was really janky. What that would do is when we clicked from one inspected submission to another, what would happen is the click away would execute first, and then after a bit it would execute the other I want to say the onClick on the header inside of here. So it would execute two things, and it sort of jittered. So we fixed that with this. God bless this guy, whoever wrote this. I'm really excited to learn this new functionality. I'd never known this before, this on mouse enter, on mouse leave thing. But we do actually have access to hover with React through this on mouse enter and on mouse leave. And after we learned that, what we did is we set an additional piece of state inside here with submission hover, and we basically called set submission hover with true and false on mouse enter and on mouse leave. And what that in turn does is we pass that into person again. If I can find it, I apologize. This is becoming a really big file here. We pass that back into here, and we basically disable this click away listener when the user is hovering over another header. In other words, if the user wants to click from one submission to another, we disable this click away listener. Okay, that was quite a mouthful. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering why we're not just doing all this functionality inside of here, in other words, why we're not setting hover inside of here and then using that state directly within here, and why we're sending it to the parent component in the first place, is because the functionality it works in between submissions. In other words, if we hover over one person, uh, where we map this, if we hover over one person, we want that to change the state such that every other person component sees that it's hovering over it. So we can't necessarily put that functionality within person itself. We do need that parent component inspect here. Okay, I'm sort of out of breath. So thank you guys for watching. If you did, I honestly don't know how many people are watching at this point because I don't have another monitor. I don't know. I do it so maybe some people will watch it afterwards. Let's hope. Alrighty. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in a bit.